I'm Fernando Parra, and it is a pleasure to host you today as one of our missions at the Institute for Family Business is to provide resources to family businesses in our community and to serve as a nexus for our students to connect with our family business community as well. We are offering this seminar in conjunction with our wonderful speaker today, Gail Covington, who's the founder and managing partner at the Covington Wealth Management Group of Morgan Stanley. I am very grateful to all the board members who have made this possible and all the members who contribute on a yearly basis to make our programming available to the public. We're also grateful to all the leadership in the Craig School of Business for all their support and making this this center thrive. I have a few members of the community that I'd like to say hi to. So please, by all means, welcome. And don't forget that there's going to be a follow-up session next Friday at 3 o'clock. If you were here with us last week, you might have met our wonderful speaker, who is the Senior Vice President and Family Wealth Director of the Covington Wealth Management Group at Morgan Stanley. As you may have heard in the last session, she's responsible for all aspects of the investment process, portfolio construction, and risk management for family businesses. And this includes anything from C-suite to private equity executives and company founders, as well as their families and their family offices, serving as a trusted advisor across market cycles and across generations. Gail, we are excited to have you. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with our family business community and our students. And if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to send a chat to me, and I'll be monitoring the chat room as well. And I will let Gail also introduce our additional speaker, Randy. So welcome, Gail and Randy. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Fernando. It's a pleasure to be here again. And thank you so much to all the members of the Institute and the students who are so graciously here. It was wonderful to be with many of you. I recognize some of the names from last week, and excited to bring this number 2 in the second of a 3-part boot camp. For this time, I have asked my professional colleague and friend, Randy Katz, to join me. I'm really excited that Randy is here and excited to introduce to you his background. And what we're going to do is really pick up from last week for those of you who were here, and for those of you who weren't, don't worry. We're going to ground this conversation in a little bit of a hypothetical case, but similar to last week, our hope is not to make this a lecture by any means, but to really invite everyone to participate and to engage. So for those of you who are feeling a little camera shy, don't be. Feel free to come off camera and come into the conversation. There'll be plenty of opportunities for you to respond and throw your ideas into the conversation. We have a few talking points that we wanted to share, and let me just get started first with a little bit of a introduction to Randy Katz that I mentioned. So Randy is a certified financial analyst. It's the highest designation given to a finance professional. He is a former Wall Street analyst, having valued companies anywhere from 100 to $1 billion plus, extensive publications providing buy and sell side recommendations. And in the last decade, Randy has become a business advisor, advising founders and companies, closely held businesses, and is the president-elect for the California Business Association of Business Brokers. That's coming up next year. Congratulations, Randy. And you are an avid athlete and scuba diver. I know that you're a former wrestler, and I think you are officiant now, which is just amazing. And I know that for the last month and a half or so, you were in Southern California, getting out of Dodge and getting to the beach, and you just got back from the beautiful Greece. So we're all quite envious of you getting getting in that time in the sun. And welcome and thank you so much for doing this conversation. I'm super excited because more than anything, I believe in partnering and bringing in experts, and you are definitely an expert in the space of succession planning. And let me just get the conversation started. So Randy and I kind of put our heads together and came up with a number of topics that we think were worthy of really diving into. And we would like to run through these topics in a little bit of a vignette, if you will, for everyone to think through. And again, want to get the conversation started and invite everyone's participation. So you can see here, we've got quality of the financials, the requirements for the team for the sale of a business. We want to talk about lease agreements and the impact on business transactions, the preparation for the family roles, and importantly, address dynamics post-transaction. We want to also look at what happens when there is a loss of institutional knowledge. And then finally, how to determine the best fit for a future owner, right, in the event that there is a company for sale. So with that, let me roll forward. So you'll recognize these case facts for anyone who was a part of the call last week. So this is a third generation closely held family business. It's called Leaf Life Organics, and Leaf Life Organics was started by a couple in the mid 1960s. They're now in their early 80s. They are still working, but have dialed it back just a bit. They brought up 3 children, 3 adult children that work in the business, and they have children that range in age from their 20s to the 30s. The board is comprised of only family members, and the company financially does about 100 million in revenues and takes out a $5 million dividend every year. And then importantly, we talked a little bit about this last week. The holidays have become a struggle for all of the members to attend. So that's the background. And before we jump right into the first topic, I want to just again welcome Randy, give him a minute to say hello and introduce himself, and then take the lead right here.
Great. Well, thank you, Gail, and appreciate you and everybody having me. I have to joke that, you know, you mentioned the wrestling background and that I officiate now. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, given the epicenter of the group is Fresno, I'm very well aware it's the best wrestling in the state of California and some of the best in the country. I referee down there quite a bit. So what we're going to talk about is, you know, my role is in selling privately held businesses. Now, it's very rare that somebody comes to me and says, Randy, I want to sell my business and the business is in great shape. The market conditions are right. And my expectations of value are in line. There's a lot of things that will pop up in a deal that either there's expectations of value that there needs to be education on how that might work, or there might be fixes in the business to get it to the proper valuation for the owner, and even polishing around the edges without structural changes can make a great great impact on the company. So I'm going to attempt to talk about something for everybody because there's going to be owners of different sized businesses here. I want you to think about, as everything that we go through, there's 2 themes that we're going to hit, and everything we talk about is going to hit those 2 themes. One is that the risk, whether it's real risk or whether it's perceived risk, is inversely proportional to the price you're going to receive. So everything we talk about is going to be removing as much risk as possible from the business, or removing perceived risk that a buyer might see if that's the direction you choose in exiting your business. The second big theme that we'll talk about is going to be aligning your day-to-day decisions with the exit plan. So If you're attempting to maximize value while you operate your business, or you're attempting to maximize value in a deal without aligning the decisions across both, then very likely you're going to be leaving money on the table, or very likely you're going to be paying more in taxes. And so I want you to keep those two themes in mind. And of course, on the second one, more often than not, if you're setting your business up for success in a deal, you're also going to be able to operate it more effectively. You're going to be able to be more profitable while you operate it. So keep those two themes in mind. The first topic we're going to hit here, is the quality of your financials. And this is the number one issue that I see impacting the value of businesses. So we always think about intellectual property, we think about the story, but buyers, whether it's an individual owner operator buying a company, or a strategic buyer, a financial buyer, it's going to come back to the numbers eventually. And so the quality of our financials is hugely important. So Gail had laid out the case study, and let's just briefly, review this case study, the additional points. Leaf Life Organics, it specializes in sustainable vertical growing methods. We know what the initial business focused on packaging leafy greens in different varieties, but later the company added a different division. So there's now a consulting service offered in addition to its original business. The accounting system was set up with the original business 20 years ago. It's never been updated. The office manager is a generalist. The owner handed off bookkeeping duties and the accounting to that individual because the system was already set up, but the individual doesn't have a background. The company has a large accounts receivable due to being short-staffed and doesn't have a formal inventory process. So I want to keep these things in mind and open it up to the group for just a moment and ask if anybody can think about any problems that might arise given some of this fact pattern. And I'm hopeful to have somebody, stick their neck out if you want to point out anything that you might identify as a potential issue in either operation or in a sale.
And we welcome anyone's input. Fernando, we know that you have a lot of experience as a faculty member in accounting, so feel free to jump in as well.
Well, I know that there's a few members of our audience today who are in the farming industry. So I'd like to hear a little bit from that end. Imagine if that was applied to your business and you didn't have the proper processes, as Randy mentioned.
One question that I'll ask is, whether it's a show of hands or typing in the chat box, how many owners in the room have businesses that either have multiple business units, multiple locations in different states, or even if it's one unit, let's say more than 50 SKUs? Because I think that I'm probably capturing everybody in the room when we hit those. And, I'll start with, we've got multiple business units. The first question is, what does our accounting system look like? Does it actually capture the profitability by unit? Does our accounting system capture the profitability by state? Does it capture the profitability by office? If I've got one unit, but I've got 50, 100, 200 SKUs, does my accounting system help me identify what's my gross profit per SKU? And if the answer is no, then the real question is, how do we really know where to allocate resources in our business? How do we know where to allocate our marketing budget? How do we know where to allocate our people? If we have SKUs that we're not sure of the gross profit, over time, as we deal with inflation, how do we know that we're not selling certain SKUs that once we layer in operating costs, we're actually losing money on? So keep in mind that when we think of the day-to-day operation versus the exit plan, there's going to be the issue of, if I'm an owner, I can can start allocating resources to be more profitable. And during due diligence, what a buyer is going to do is they're going to dig into all of these. So let's say, for example, that I have a business unit that's not profitable and it drags down the overall profitability, and a buyer is going to value me based on my profitability. There's questions of, do I shut down the unit? Or separately, if that unit is growing, we can think that that unit is option value. As a buyer looks at the overall package, effectively what they could be doing is discounting our value, but realistically, we should look at the unit that's not making money but is growing, and we can see those trends, and we know there's option value in those. So I'm going to stop there and see, before I move on to some other issues that I can point out in here, if there's any topics that anybody wants to comment on. And I want to try to encourage you thinking about your own business and how these things impact your business. And if you can share a quick idea, that'd be great. If not, I'll move on to the next one, but I'd love it if we can get someone sharing their thoughts on some other issues.
Randy, if I may interject, I think one of the ways that I like to describe the accounting approach, where you put everything together in one big bucket, and then you do the books in just one big set of books without actually looking into every single item and the profitability of production lines or types of services or specific SKUs, as you mentioned, is what I call the peanut butter accounting system, right? Where you just spread it all over, and all the costs are going to be spread across the whole enterprise. And at the end of the day, somebody gets subsidized, either a department, a line of production, a service, and sometimes those services are meant to be subsidized. If you think of, let's say, Costco's rotisserie chicken, right? Like, it is not going to be as profitable as the rest of the lines of services, but it is a good entry product. And that's okay for some of those things, but you got to believe that they are also analyzing how effective that is. And if you don't have the formal systems in place to be tracking your costs and your profitability in such a strategic way, then you're not going to be able to make decisions that are going to make you let you stay profitable in the marketplace.
Yep, and just, let's go back to the main theme. If I have a feedback loop that allows me to make decisions, there's a greater chance I'm going to make a good decision. If there's a greater chance I'm going to make a good decision, there's less risk in my business. And if there's less risk in my business, I should be making more money. And of course, I should be selling for more. So I'm going to always come back to those themes. What's a common thing that happens when we're growing too fast? Does anyone have, this is a high class problem, but when we grow too fast, what could be an issue that we see when we look at our balance sheets? And if there's anyone that wants to type in the chat box, if you're not going to pop your video, I'll just in the interest of time, and I'm going to keep coming back to trying to get our audience to participate. When we grow too fast, the common problem we often see is that it sucks up cash. Very high quality problem, but we pump money into working capital in the form of inventory, in the form of accounts receivable. We're buying stuff, so we're paying off accounts payable, so it sucks up cash. Well, what we're trying to do as we operate our business is to create as much cash flow as possible, right? It's great for when we're operating and for selling. So in the last bullet point here, we talked about the business having large accounts receivable due to being short-staffed and not a formal inventory process. So think about, do I have any obsolete inventory? Do I have slow-moving inventory? Am I even taking inventory? And we'll probably should come back as a last question about what happens if we don't take inventory. But as we think about creating cash, if we're able to keep tight inventory controls, if we're able to collect on our accounts receivable, use our vendor terms, these are going to be things that effectively will create cash in our business, allow us to reinvest the cash. But additionally, working capital is an operating asset of our business. And in a business transaction, buyers will expect working capital to be included in a deal. So if my business is sucking up working capital, effectively my business is taking the asset. Whereas if I can manage my working capital, reduce the amount of working capital the business needs, I'm able to take that extra cash and make it a personal asset, more cash in my bank account rather than a buyer taking that cash. And before I turn it back to you, Gail, just the last point that I would just make on this slide is I mentioned taking inventory, and I'll ask everybody in the room, do you ever skip your monthly inventories, or maybe you have a rolling inventory, or do you skip your annual inventories? And if the answer is yes, then the real question is, how do you even know how profitable you are? Because if you're not taking inventory, it's impossible to truly know what your cost of goods sold is. And so I run into lots of business transactions where the inventory or point of sale system or accounting system doesn't match an inventory count, or inventory count's not taken, which means the financials, your cash flow might be right, but if your cash flow is a function of just cleaning up your balance sheet and not cash operated by the business, that will impact the deal. So having the staff doing your inventory counts, that plays into your working capital, plays into your P&L, plays into how a buyer's going to look at it, I would point out as a big piece and big issue that comes up in our quality financials. So I'm going to pause there. I could talk about quality financials for hours and hours and hours, but in the interest of time, Gail, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Sure.
To move on to the next topic.
Thank you, Randy. Let me just echo and underscore the importance. The fact that this is the first slide, is worth noting, right? This becomes one of the most important thing and elements for a smooth and efficient transition. The next is topic number 2, and it relates to something that actually dovetails the first topic, which is the importance of having enough runway in a process and enough of a strategic vision to bake in the elements of good planning, right? So in this slide, it's topic number 2. It's really about the requirements of the team in order to effect the sale of a business. So here are the additional case facts for this slide. So same company, Leaf Organics, the office manager doubles as a bookkeeper and has never been through any sort of formal valuation process for the business. Number 2, the company has a long-standing relationship with a local commercial bank that primarily offers small business loans and credit facilities. In addition, there is a small solo practitioner law firm in town that has acted as the go-to general counsel for years for the company. Next, the founder of the business is slowing down considerably, but has yet to fully transition over his role as CEO and all the duties and responsibilities to his oldest son, who is the expected leader and heir apparent for the business. And finally, the board consists only of family members. So let's open up the conversation. What are the requirements? What's coming up for folks here? I saw a couple of people curious whether Jasmine or Jackie or Fernando would like to offer any comments here. And again, what we're looking at is really the lens of who needs to comprise the team for the company so that they can efficiently and effectively sell the business.
One of the things that I may ask is, can the business continue with, without the active participation of some of these human resources that we have, right? You have an office manager that doubles as a bookkeeper. You have a solo practitioner law firm that may or may not have a succession plan of their own. And you see that we do not have a plan yet to say who's going to take over as I decide to kind of take a break from the legacy I've built and transition into enjoying some of that legacy, or getting the rest of my family to participate in this legacy. And so that would be the number one question. Seems that there's no plan here.
I think you're spot on, Fernando. Having a plan, being thoughtful, really looking down the road about the needs of the business, both from a internal staffing, but also if there is the objective of selling the business, right? Arriving at that conclusion, which in and of itself is a process, but then making sure that the company has the right advice and counsel. So a couple things that are worth noting. So for an office manager to be doubling as a bookkeeper and has never been through a formal valuation process, it's really pointing out to, is there a skill set mismatch, right? Or a deficit of skills that are really going to be necessary to ensure that the quality of the financials, back to the topics that Randy walked through, that those are really going to be done in a way that is going to ready the company for even the due diligence that's going to be necessary to complete by any prospective buyer. So that's one thing. It's not uncommon for a business to see their finance team suddenly beef up and add a few folks. Sometimes it'll be an opportunity to find a professional CFO, someone who has been through the financing process before. So typically you'd see a staffing change. In addition, someone who has the strength and the experience to do all of the quality of the financials and all of the changes to the systems, the inventory, the account receivables, all of those. Second, this company has a long-standing relationship with a commercial bank that primarily offers small loans and credit. Well, that's important, and it may have helped the company to get to a certain level of success, but typically in a transaction, a commercial bank is not sufficient for what's needed. And this is where the team is going to expand to not only include the right internal person, but the right external person in the form of an investment banker. And this is, the banking team is going to come in, they're going to need to be hired. It's typical for a company to interview several banking firms, some large, some small, those that have the sector experience in order to sell a business, if that's the objective. So finding the right investment banker firm is going to matter, and there are mid-market, lower mid-market, large banks, and so finding the right banking team is going to matter. The solo practitioner is really pointing out that there might be a close personal relationship with the go-to counsel, but in a transaction, there's typically going to not only the need for a strong business attorney, right, that has been able to scale and grow with the ambitions of the company in terms of the servicing, the contract, the leasing, etc. But then also, typically there would be a need for a transaction attorney, right? So this is a very specific deal counsel who can help the client go all the way through diligence, through the sale process, and through closing. The founder has yet to slow down, and so that means that they really haven't done the transition. And part of what I'm getting to here is, if the board consists only of family members, and family members have really just come up in the business and don't necessarily have any transaction experience, it could be that you are lacking independent board members who, one, have the sector experience, and two, have the transaction experience. And it's not uncommon for a company with a vision of, let's say, 3 to 5 years for an exit, for them to begin to rotate off some of the family board members and look to make the board more balanced. Some would say that an absolute best practice is to have a certain ratio of family members that are more in the minority. And I'm not talking about the voting rights. I'm talking about just the number of board members, so that you make sure that you have good, trusted, independent counsel and advice. So with that, let me, any questions or comments on that?
If I may interject real quick,
Yeah.
one of the things that I think a lot of our family businesses face is, and we talked about this last week, right? That governance, you mentioned that governance board, right? That's going to make those decisions, but a lot of our family businesses are not structured that way. So when is a good time to say, all right, let's formalize this? I don't know if this is outside of our conversation today, but I feel like it's important for some of those family businesses in our area that have not considered restructuring that their business in such a way.
Yeah. Thank you, Fernando. If I could maybe just hold on that point, because it's gonna come up, and then it'll be a good time to address that. So thank you. Randy, do you have any comments on this other than before I move on?
I mean, I think that part of it just talked about the team, and, you know, clearly the CPA being a big part of it as we think about, you know, not just what we get, but what we keep. And I can't stress enough that when we think of our accounting team, we talked about the bookkeeper here, and you also mentioned the CFO. And depending on the size of our business, we might only need someone to reconcile our books with the bookkeeper. We might have a controller paying bills, or we might have a CFO thinking strategically about how do we manage our debt, how do we manage our capital, how do we set up our accounting system and our team.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of, in a sale, there's a lot of reports that are going to be pulled, and you're slicing and dicing data many different ways. Your bookkeeper may not be able to do that, or you may not want the bookkeeper to know there's a deal in place. So you may either be bringing in a full-time CFO or even a part-time CFO to do the work. So just stressing the value that the CFO can bring in, as Fernando talked about, structuring things, right? Reorganizing. The CFO can really help in thinking through the build out, and is hugely important in this discussion.
Thank you, Randy. I was hoping someone would bring up the topic of the CPA. There are obviously a number of tax-related issues at the corporate level and also at the personal level. And it's often the case that the company CPA is going to sometimes be the same as the firm that does the taxes for the family, and sometimes it's a separate firm altogether. But that is absolutely essential. There are certain preferential types of stock ownership. There is a treatment for qualified small business stock. We're not going to do a deep dive on it, but it's has some nuances and very specific requirements in terms of the age of the company and kind of the maximum asset levels for the company. So having a good, strong tax firm involved. And then the other member of the team that's really essential is a personal investment advisor or financial advisor. So essentially the banker, the transaction attorney, the CPA, the business attorney, and then the investment advisor. And that's really for the personal planning for that family and the owners. So moving on to the next topic number 3, Randy.
Topic number 3. So we're going to talk about leases. And this, for me, I've both published articles and videos where I talk about, you know, landlords killing our deals and being problematic. And sometimes when we're in certain markets, landlords forget about what it was like when it's a very soft market and we save them. But it's been pretty challenging market when you've got tight vacancies and landlords have a lot of power. So huge issue in transactions from planning deals as well as planning our operations. So in this particular scenario, Our business operates out of 3 facilities, non-aligned lease terms, so they're expiring at different dates. One of the warehouses is coming up for renewal in 6 months. One of the locations, one of the family members think we might be able to eliminate, and the founders believe they want to sell the business in 2 years. So I'll ask the same question as before. If anybody wants to share any issues that they see, popping up as we think about, we have our lease agreements, we've got this potential deal. Any ideas of issues that might pop up? And I'll just give a second if anybody wants to help me here.
Welcome, Joanne. It's nice to see you. Thank you for joining us.
So let me ask a couple questions, and maybe if somebody wants to type, I'll do some true or false if someone wants to type into the chat box, what they think. True or false, can I assign my lease agreement to a buyer without going through a process with the landlord? Or I should say,
and Randy, can you clarify when you say assign? Tell us what you mean.
Can I, as the tenant, have somebody else take over my lease contract and become the tenant of my facility without doing anything with the landlord? False. Okay. So thanks, Joanne. So the way a lease would generally read, not always, but most often, is going to say something to the effect of, the lease can't be assigned without landlord consent. And then usually there'll be a clause that says something to the effect of, landlord's consent cannot be unreasonably withheld. So, which means that if we want somebody to take over our lease, we need to go to the landlord and have them approve of it. And for lots of reasons, landlords may not want to deal with the cost of hiring their attorney. They might not want to review the buyer. Maybe they're just busy and they're negligent to their property, and sometimes they're difficult to deal with. Sometimes they say they won't assign. Oh, look at that. So we now have to be bringing the landlord into our conversations, and those who are difficult to deal with can be problematic for us. So let's just say that a landlord is willing to work with us and assign an agreement. The next one's, a true or false. Let's say that I have a lease that has 3 years left and 2 option periods for 5 years. So I have the ability to renew it for an additional 10 years, but I have to exercise those options. If I do assign the lease agreement to a new individual, new company, do the option periods transfer along with the 3 years that were remaining? And I guess I should say the option periods do, if I try to make it a true or false question. So anybody ideas of whether the option periods transfer? And I'm looking at the chat box to see if I get any there. So generally speaking, our real estate attorney would say, unless the lease says that the option goes with it, that it probably doesn't. So I like Jackie's answer of maybe. That's probably the best answer.
I was going to say maybe too.
Yeah, that's really probably the best answer, right? So we may go and negotiate a lease and get these option periods for ourselves, thinking we've got a long-term home for our business, but when a buyer looks at it, they might not think they have a long-term home. So what are some problems if we don't have a long-term home for our business? So there might be a town 3 towns over that has a facility, but has anybody relocated their facilities in the room? What kind of challenges have you come into, if anybody wants to share? Okay, well, you can tell I'm trying not to hear myself, but that's okay. So, there's going to be issues if I'm relocating my facility. What's the cost to relocate my facility? That's one of them. Disruption to my operation. I'm shut down for production, so that impacts my revenue. But what about my team? What happens if I have to go 3 towns over to find something of comparable cost? Is my team going to travel for it? Am I going to lose employees? So we've got some big issues, both operationally as well as in a deal. So thinking about securing ourselves a long-term home through leases, certainly buying the real estate, and there are really preferential type loans when owning a business and buying real estate that's worth knowing about as well. but it can be problematic to relocate. And the third true or false I have, so I got to make it a true or false statement. If I assign the lease to a buyer, I am no longer liable if the buyer defaults on my lease. And you can probably guess, I'm not seeing any chats, but you can probably guess that, again, it's going to be false. So even if I assign my lease agreement to a buyer, if there's not a release of liability from my landlord, I'm still on the hook secondarily liable. So when we go back to, point number 3, where the founders want to sell their business in 2 years, but their lease is their lease is expiring in 6 months, but they want to sell the business in 2 years. How do we deal with that? So these are going to be conversations where what I very often see occurring and becomes problematic is we may have been in our facility for 5, 10, 20 years, and every time we renew our lease, the landlord just provides the exact same lease, updates the dates, and we don't need our attorney to review it, right? Because it's the same agreement. But when we start thinking about how does this align with what we want to accomplish, is the lease going to be assignable? Am I going to get off the hook? Are the option periods going to go with it? So, a separate one. What about if the landlord might sell the building? We're in California with Prop 13 that if they've owned that building for 30 years, property taxes might be very low.
Right.
But what happens when they sell it and that property tax increase flows through to you because of your triple net lease or the incremental operating cost on your lease? What could that mean in terms of the additional cost? And I saw someone type into the chat box, negotiate. There's a lot of things that are important in our lease agreement outside of what is the cost per square foot that we're going to pay, where our real estate attorney really needs to be in there negotiating all of these terms and making sure that those terms align with what our needs are in a deal. When it comes to having multiple locations with non-aligned lease terms, that might mean having a real estate, commercial real estate agent coming in, starting to align those lease terms. So that way I can start getting out of my liability around the same time. I can start making sure that if I'm going to relocate the business out of state, I can do it at in an efficient way. So let's see what negotiated clause that may not be attractive to potential business buyer. Yes. So you really want to make sure that your real estate attorney knows that you are not only thinking about operating today and negotiating the best lease today, but having that exit plan in mind. So coming back to that theme that I mentioned at the very top, I'm going to look at just my notes to see if I have anything else on the lease. I don't have any other big points on the lease.
What I was just going to jump in with, Randy, is, just going back to the slide from before about who's on the team, right? So not only is it a financial advisor, banker, transactional attorney, CPA, business lawyer, but, now a real estate professional, depending on kind of the real estate assets of the business.
Yes, absolutely. And it occurred to me, when you're negotiating the lease, it might even make sense, even though you're years away from the deal, to talk to your investment banker or broker who's working on the deal to get a sense of who is the likely buyer for my business. Is my likely buyer going to want this lease? In which case, maybe I work out a very long-term agreement. Is my likely buyer going to get rid of the facility? In which case, if I can create a cost synergy earlier on in the process, that means the business makes more money and maybe they give me more in a deal. So you may be even having a conversation about your lease with your investment advisor and your investment banker, because the decision of the duration of the lease that you negotiate might be different depending on who is the type of buyer. So if we think it's a private equity group and they have to keep the space, that's different than somebody in the business that's getting rid of it. We need to know those things to make some good decisions.
One thing that comes up for me, Randy, is if it's a very long-term lease, so let's say it's gone on more than a decade and 20 years, one, whether, the owner might have transitioned the ownership to a next generation, and now you have children who have, these big warehouses and may have different ideas for what to do with the real estate. And they may, see it as a reason to either negotiate hard, kick out the tenant, etc. The other thing that I think we probably commonly see is a business with a long enough lease where they end up just, financing a purchase of a building properly. So all things to sort out. And I think the thing that's probably really clear is that the time for really strategic planning is just going to be super essential, and sort out all these issues that we've discussed. So
Yeah, time's the key point.
Forward. So here's topic number 4, and this is really about the family and the dynamics post-transaction. So the couple of facts that we're adding here, the two founders, the husband and the wife, don't quite see eye to eye on whether or not to even sell the business. The wife aspires to travel more, spend more time with grandchildren, whereas the husband really has his identity really tied to the business and sees this as his day-to-day. Isn't quite sure what he's going to do, doesn't like golf that much, doesn't like to fish, right? So, what to do is a challenge. 2 of the children started working in the family business right after high school and don't have really clear other professional options in the town where they are. The 3rd son, working in the business, went to college and graduate school, and he assumes that he is going to take over from the father, right? So he's that heir apparent. And then the spouses of the children that are working in the business are largely at home raising children and dependent on the salary and the annual dividends that come out of the business annual distributions. So what's coming up here, right? What are we looking at with this set of facts? What might be challenging and tricky to deal with this set of facts here? Carrie, I know that you have helped a number of families, and certainly on the trust side and the estate side, and you've seen business issues at the core of trust planning and dynamics with family. What comes up for you here?
Well, I do think that there is a family mediation in their future, multi-generational. So if people, the different ages are depending on that, there has to be a huge personal plan, whether it be vacationing, grandchildren, careers for our kids that'll be out of the business. I think it's going to be a tough one. I think it's important. That's why you need to do it years and years in advance and have those family meetings each year to say, okay, where are we going next? How is everybody doing? Where are we going? So it may really scuttle the program if the personal issues are not managed early.
Completely agree. Joanne, I know you're there. Any thoughts on your side? Fernando?
I was going to say ladies first, but one of the things that I would say is always listen to your spouse. If you don't want to then come back to an expert on conflict management in the future. At the end of the day, going back to the actual question is, what do you have in mind in terms of your succession plan if you believe your children are really dependent on this salary or the dividend distributions that are coming out of the business? And so there may not always be, you may not have to just exit out of that business. You may have the ability to use maybe an employee stock ownership plan, or start with the beginning of the transition early on, so that you may have a middle point. So I mean, I think this is something that should be discussed with the entire family, especially if they're so entrenched in the business. And it seems like in this particular case, you have children that are actually involved in the business and that understand that they make a big part of it, and they're benefiting quite significantly from it.
Absolutely.
I would like to, well, you know, actually, you know, I run a business and I have a business partner. It's something that we always discuss because we're workaholics and there's no balance of, I want to travel, I want to live life and kind of enjoy what we build. And he doesn't, he just wants to work 7 days a week. And it's like, where is there a balance to this? Because it's like, when do we stop and live life? There's no balance to it. And my kids work in the business too. And it's my daughter's going to school. There's no balance to it. And where do we draw the line? It's really hard to do this when you have a family business. And honestly, it comes with, there's like literally, and Fernando worked with us and he's seen it. It's like, honestly, a boxing ring here sometimes. And it's sad, right? Because it's not funny, but you know, it's, where do you draw the line? It's really hard. It's hard. And we're growing as a company. You don't know where, because you want more. You want to grow, you want more, but I really don't know where to draw the line. It becomes so personal and emotional because you want it all. It's hard.
Thank you, Joanne. You know, it resonates with us about, number one, how hard it is to run a family business, and that sort of blurred line between kind of the personal and the professional, and when you stop working, when you turn it off because you are your boss, right? And, you know, in the case of these two founders, and again, thank you for sharing, who don't see eye to eye, it seems as though the wife is thinking about the next generation and some other things outside the business, traveling, spending time with grandchildren, and then you have the husband whose identity is really, you know, intimately tied to the business and doesn't see it kind of another path forward. And that when you're 80 is very problematic, right? Because at 80, right, and you look at sort of the average life expectancy for most men, it's in their, you know, mid 80s. For women, it's in their early 90s. But if the founder of Leaf Organics isn't thinking actively about a transition with his children and doing the hard work to put others in charge of different divisions and different core decision making, then you're going to have a really hard time pulling that off, right? So the idea that he's still tied in such a day-to-day way is problematic. And when a prospective buyer comes along and sees that there is not really a plan in place with that next gen, it's not a good thing, because what did Terry say? A family therapist is needed. A family retreat or 2 or 5 is really important. There are sources of capital that exist inside of families, and they need to be well functioning for transactions like this to go well. So human, intellectual, social, and financial, and all of those sources of capital are so important. And for example, in the second scenario there, if you have 2 children who don't have clear professional options and could get put out of a job with an acquisition, but yet you have the heir apparent who might stay in place for a interim transition with a employment agreement, and that person is assured of potentially some success with the transaction, you know, a job into the future, but maybe some uncertainty about the other 2 children. You have a dynamic there that is challenging, and what all parents want is to treat their children equally, right? But the issue of fairness is also really important. And when you have different roles, and let's say you know, initially your thought was to take the equity that's intended to transfer to the kids, and you've divided it equally, but now you have kids that leave a business or those that step into more senior management roles, right, that should be rewarded differently. You know, suddenly you have a dynamic at Thanksgiving that is tough. If you have spouses that are simply taking a dividend out of the business and not working, and you have a future transaction, you hope that there will be enough ownership at that level for them to be more independently working, independently wealthy, excuse me. Otherwise, you have a real challenge there. Okay. The intergenerational wealth transfer, the dynamics, the communication piece is really, really key. A family that hasn't practiced some governance and talking out hard stuff, including what's fair, what's equitable, how do you reward this contribution versus another. Those are very, very tough situations with which to air all of that in front of a prospective buyer. So let me keep going, kind of just in the interest of time. Randy, can I bring you back for topic number 5?
Yes. So, you know, the key theme here is a lot of institutional knowledge in the business residing with, you know, a few key employees or a few managers. And, you know, if you can show a hand or type in the chat box, I wonder who in the room has lost an employee at some point that they thought was really, really good. Because I'm guessing it's everybody. And I wonder what happened to your business, what happened to your life for the next 3 to 6 months after you lost that employee.
Gained a lot of weight.
Yeah. I mean, that's right? More stress.
Right.
And it's more stress because there's more work. There's more distractions. That individual is very efficient. So they could get more done in less time, which means now that if I'm replacing that individual, it's with someone who's putting in more time, which probably means higher cost and lower profitability. So we don't want to lose our good employees. What then happens if we're potentially doing some type of deal where multiple family members who are the key employees might go away at the same time? What would occur with a buyer? Because that's what a buyer's thinking. I'm gonna have less efficiency, higher cost, more stress. And what we know is more risk means a lower price. So the question then is, how do we deal with those issues? And I should probably bring in a third, you know, a totally separate topic, because this plays into exactly the same solution to a different problem, which is, I wonder how many of us in the room have a client that's 10% of our revenue, or 20% of our revenue, or 50% of our revenue. Because if this family member or this key employee is the primary relationship manager to the client, not only is there more work, there is now risk that these big clients are going to go away. So it comes back to the solution, which solves many problems, which is cross-training among employees, right? Elevating that next level of management, right? So giving opportunities for our team to grow. And it might cost more, but I'm also sure that the additional cost to one of our employees is far less expensive than the cost to us of having to replace them when they leave. So that's going to play in for working with our business today, as well as in a transaction when we've got employees cross-trained, multiple touch points into the client. When we think of I'm looking at my notes here, so bear with me for just one moment. I actually hit on the main issues that I wanted to hit. And so as I'm looking at the clock, Gail, I'll ask if you have any other things you want to point out, because this also hit on topic number 2, which was very similar. So unless you have anything else to point out on this slide, I think that is the main issue that I want to point out, which is cross-train. We talked about concentration of revenue. I should add long-term agreements with those customers. Should that main touch point go away, the customer can't go away, and bringing up the next level of management.
Well said.
And we have some time built in for Q&As and so we didn't close the session at the hour, but it was 15 after the hour. One of the things that Jackie mentioned before is to make sure that we make non-emotional decisions, right, in our previous prompt, which is critical, I think, in any of these situations, having that emotional intelligence to say, this is what's important, right? And so when you are non-emotional, you may think about what's going to be the longest strategy. And in the case of your HR and having an employee or a family member, for that matter, that value that has so much worth or adds so much value. And sometimes it's just the last name, right? Sometimes you just want to keep that last name in the business, so you may be able to negotiate, keeping a family member in the transition to ensure that that legacy of your family is still carrying on, even though you've transitioned that to different management, but you still have that one person of the family that can still represent the business well. And I've seen, at least in one case of one of my clients, that was what they ended up doing, just keeping a family member as a partner for the sake of the legacy that, more than 70 years worth of legacy meant for that business.
Well, there's the issue of keeping that family member, and then there's the other issue, which is the one I was looking for in my notes, which is we also have non-family members, those loyal employees that have been with us a long time, and they kind of feel like part of the family.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking about how we treat them, and there's a double-edged sword. Oftentimes we have these loyal employees that they will never leave us, and they end up working for a below market wage. What happens when a new buyer comes in? Are they going to be loyal to that individual? When they find out that someone of an equal position is making more, what's going to occur? So when we have sometimes those loyal employees and we think about the same family issues that occur, what happens with them if their wage isn't perhaps where it should be? Or what happens if they're way overpaid, and how's that going to impact a buyer? So we have to be constantly thinking about certainly family, but also those longer term employees who we kind of view as family.
Absolutely. Thank you, Randy. All right, let me go to our last slide. And this is really about how to determine the best fit future owner. Okay? So here are the additional facts. So during recent board meetings, the topic of the sale of the business has come up. There doesn't appear to be a consensus on the right direction or what would constitute the best future owner. As we know, the mom and the dad, the founders of the company, don't see eye to eye on whether or not this is even a good idea. The dad is all in favor of kind of, staying in place. He needs a reason for being every day. The mother has eyes on more time with the kids. There have been several private equity firms that have been calling on the founders and have offered grand visions for Leaf like organics, including something called a tuck-in transaction, right, where they essentially tuck the company in as part of a roll-up. Additionally, there are a few what we call large strategic leaders in the organic food space who have accelerated their acquisitions in recent years just because the growth in the organic business is very, very high. And so here comes the question for management and for the family and for the board. What is right for the future, right? Is it a private equity firm, right? Is it a large strategic, right, that is similarly in the food space? And there's not consensus. So how might a process be arranged to help sort this out?
If I may offer,
Please, yeah.
at the risk of being the faculty member in the room that always likes to profess, one of the things that I've discussed with other business owners in the past is that there comes a point in which you may feel that a competitor may simply have so much strength to absorb your business by just simply recreating it within a few months, that the sale may become inevitable, right? So you think of, and probably a bad example, but Instagram to Facebook, where, you know, obviously Facebook had quite the right amount of resources to recreate the actual business model that Instagram had, perhaps not the immediate followers. And so eventually it might have been a tough race, and they might have lost to the big company. And at the end of the day, the vision of your company is to provide a type of service, and you want to make sure that it's done in a proficient way, that it's done with top quality, and that your brand continues to live on. And so at the end of the day, sometimes you may think, well, I may want to take this across the world, and the only individuals or the only structure that is able to do so is by allowing this acquisition through a bigger company that may just tuck in the rest of the business, right? That basically absorbs my business as part of their line. And that may bring a lot of fruition, but I think that would be one of those that it's hard to fight. But other than that, I think most family businesses would say, if for any other reason you may offer me whatever money, this is not just about the money I'm getting out of the business, but it's the legacy I'm building, and the legacy the occupation I want for my family in the futures to come, right?
Absolutely. Randy, do you have any thoughts here?
Well, I think Fernando just said the most important thing that I could have heard, which is it always starts with, it's never about the money. It's always has to be about something else. Because if it's about the money, there's never going to be a transition, because, right, the ongoing cash flow that goes away, depending on our business, the multiples, right, the amount we sell it for relative to what we make, they're not usually high enough for you know, typical Main Street businesses, non-tech businesses. There's got to be something behind it that's not the money that leads to those decisions. And it came back to, was it Jackie that shared with us about the struggles? And there's a question of what's next, right? What do I want to do with my life? And the why behind those decisions that, you know, I thought that when Fernando said something to the effect of, you know, there's got to be something besides the money. I mean, I just can't agree more.
No, for sure. You know, when you think about conversations inside the boardroom where a sale is contemplated, and, you know, typically a family closely held business will arrive at that after the phone calls have started, right? And it's not just one, but it's maybe 5 or 6 or more, where suddenly they recognize that they should create a process, they should bring together a team and figure out whether or not now is the right time to sell some or piece a stake in the business, and then to whom. Is it a strategic? Is it a financial sponsor? Typically for, you know, for some of the most successful deals, it is an all or nothing, right? And really the future of the business, either as a standalone business or as part of a bigger business, is going to matter, and that is going to go directly to the role of the family members in the future. So
yeah, and if I want to be done in 6 months, a financial buyer is not the best buyer. You know, a strategic buyer might be the right buyer. If I want to work for 5 years, maybe a financial buyer is the best one, because they can provide additional capital to allow us to grow the business. So absolutely, the type of buyer and our needs are going to impact the direction that we take it.
Yeah, great. Well, Fernando, we are just
Out of time.
Wrap up now, kind of right at the time, and just the last page here, a summary of all the issues that we went through, and hopefully helpful. And as you know, Randy and I are available for questions, for follow-up, and thank you very much again for having us here.
Absolutely. I think that from quality of financials all the way to HR and everything that was discussed today, we tend to focus so much on the governance and the transition documents, but these are some of the key elements that can be an impediment. They can play a huge impediment to a proper exit on a business. So for those of you that are just tuning in, or that were not able to see the slide but are joining us via our YouTube channel or via Facebook, please let us know if we can be of any service. We have a great team and wonderful advisors as well that have volunteered to share this wisdom with us. So thank you both to Randy Katz and Gail Covington for all of your expertise and sharing that kindly with our community. For those of you that are still here, this is going to actually be released by next week, and so we'll have the recording shortly, and we'll follow up with you, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, Fernando.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you, Jasmine.
Thank you. Take care.